This is Pop Culture Confidential, and I'm Christina Yerling Biru. Hey everyone, welcome to the show. Today's guests helped bring to life one of the most iconic new characters in modern horror. I'm thrilled to welcome Leo Satkovich and Jason Collins, makeup department head and special makeup effects designer on Zach Cregger's smash hit, the phenomenon Weapons. We dive into their incredible work creating the terrifying but fabulous Aunt Gladys, performed to perfection by Amy Madigan. How they drew inspiration from things like Cindy Sherman's photography, Mink Stole, and John Waters' Pink Flamingos. We talk about everything from the intricate makeup detail, that potato peeler, wrangling the mob of kids, and so much more. And yes, we get some Aunt Gladys Halloween costume tips straight from the brilliant artisans themselves. Let's get at it. Leo and Jason, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Hi, Christina. Thank you very much for having us.
Before we get started, could you just introduce yourselves and your role on this film?
My name's Leo Satkovich, and I was the makeup department head on Weapons.
My name is Jason Collins, and I was the special makeup effects designer on Weapons.
Before we dive into the iconic Aunt Gladys, the potato peelers, and the 12-year-old mobs, I want to start with kind of the big picture. Weapons is a scary film, but for me, it was actually always also quite moving. It worked sort of as a metaphor for a child growing up in addiction, sort of the fear and instability of the absent parents and adults, also a community in the aftermaths of something, a collective trauma, say a school shooting. And it's also so funny. Cregger has cited Magnolia as an influence. I just wanted to ask you both, what were the conversations you had with him at first, those early discussions in terms of genre, tone, and the overall vision of the film?
I think we knew pretty quickly that whatever we were going to do had to be extremely grounded in reality. You know, there were a lot of opportunities for some really fun makeups in the script. So whatever we had to do, it all had to feel very real. Zach really pulls you up to that line of camp at times, and he just kind of danced around it without crossing it. So I believe that was always at the forefront of our design aspects, was because I feel like the only way you can really pull off something like that is if it is super grounded and if it is extremely realistic. So every time, Jason and I would talk about the peeler or Gladys's makeup or the fork stabs, it all had that possibility of being a little bit too much, whether it's too much blood or too much prosthetic or too much wound. We always kept in mind that we wanted to pull back and really keep it grounded. So it was always about the story.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that, how the script reads is it's very, very, as Leo said, grounded for the first two acts, really. And as we get into the third act, that's when sort of everything hits the wall at once. And in order for that to really have impact, I think that it was really important for us to ground everything, whether it be, whether Leo's makeup looks for everybody, so it just feels like the person next door, whether it be the certain aspects of gore or effects, like like Austin Abrams' character has a James, who plays this character James, he has a black eye. Trying to keep all of those things really realistic, and when people get stabbed in the face with needles and everything. So they when we do get into the audacity of it, the third act, which really is when everything sort of takes a left turn, that stuff will have maximum impact if you keep everything very naturalized and normalized up to that point. And that includes not only the storytelling, but our visual looks for everybody and everything, so that they do stand out, so that the film did make a left turn, so that everybody's like, what's going on now? This was not what I thought it was going to, and it's like, once you do that, then you can get into, as Zach said, or as Leo said, pulling up to camp and not crossing that line, but taking it right up to that line. And really, really, so we were really, really cognizant of that the whole time. Mainly because, that was Zach's direction. Zach was cognizant of that whole time.
Let's talk about Aunt Gladys. She's bold, she's flamboyant, she has her pinks and her reds. I mean, she does not fade into the background. And of course, she's a horrific monster, but someone like myself who's a bit timid with my own style, I have to admit she has flair. I mean, who was she for you? What did you see when you started thinking about her look?
It was a very broad blueprint for us as far as the words in the script. She was audacious. Her face was caked in makeup. Clown-like, I believe, were the words, with red hair. So that's that's what we had. That's what we had to go off of, which is a pretty fun place to start. Trish Somerville started before we did, so she had some good time in with Zach. And
she's
they really
fabulous costume designer.
Yes, apologies. Yes, Trish Somerville, the costume designer. So she had some time with Zach to really establish that foundation, which is where we got into those bright pantsuits. So we started there, and then we just kind of played around with it. It was really Gladys. Gladys was her own ever evolving entity herself. So we all just bounced off of one another. I think it was really amazing that Zach really leaned onto all of us just for creative input, creative output, which was always so much fun, just bouncing all these ideas off one another. As far as her straight makeup goes, we landed somewhere that's her makeup could be very period ambiguous. She could have come from any time period, which is where we landed with her matte red lip. A matte red lip is always a bold choice, and it's always a fun choice. It stands out. The graphic liner that was very, she thought she applied it beautifully, but of course, from watching the movie, she didn't do such a great job. Her washed out blue eyeshadow, the crazy bold eyebrows. I mean, they can be very reminiscent of the late 40s, the mid 50s, all the way up to the late 60s. It could be any time period that she just picks and chooses these trends, and then she sticks with it, and she confidently applies it, and she feels like she's the deal all the time, 24/7. And Amy Madigan just really, really pulled off these looks the way that she wore the wig, she wore the makeup, she wore the prosthetics, she wore the costume. It was never the reverse. She always, from the very first moment that we actually see her walking into Principal Marcus's office, she's so confident, and right away who this woman is. You may not know what she is, but you know who she is, and she's a woman of confidence. So it was really from the straight makeup perspective, it was so much fun to play with that. I say beauty makeup, it's more of an unbeauty makeup, but it was so much fun to play with that beauty makeup.
I'm a huge Cindy Sherman fan. I understand that was one of your references, and Diane Arbus.
It was, yeah. That was from the get. Zach, that was kind of the direction that Zach pushed us for, just to really get kind of that forced perspective, that when you're looking at something, that something just seems it's a beautiful picture, but something seems off. Something is a little unsettling to the eye, and you can't really put your finger on it. So that was the direction that Zach pointed us to begin with, and from there it just evolved.
Any particular Cindy Sherman photos?
Oh, we just had
the whole book.
Yeah, we had mood boards of a bunch of things, and as far as the makeup goes, I mean, I think I landed somewhere between Jane Hudson and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and Mink Stole and John Waters' Pink Flamingos. They're just big, audacious, fun characters. They were a huge inspiration with me, and tie that into the beautiful works of Cindy Sherman and Diane Arbus, and it was an artist's dream come true.
And then she has other looks, the sort of, I don't know what you would call it, the older look where she is the turban and without the wig.
Yeah, well, we really wanted to we wanted we we wanted to add some prosthetics to really drive home that creep factor, that unsettling factor. And Jason designed some very beautiful, subtle prosthetics that just changed her face, right, Jason?
Yeah, so that's the animal, right? The animal is that she has to serve her dual purpose, and that dual purpose is when you first meet her and she walks into the principal's office, there's this audacity about her. It feels like somebody caught in time, you know, whether it's the 60s or the 70s, or it's your aunt who's sort of out of touch with everything and everybody. It's that sort of very off-putting thing. So as Leo mentioned before, that kind of walks you up to the line of camp. But Aunt Gladys, there's way more to her story than meets the eye. And that really is that she has to have this sort of predatory aspect about her. And that predatory aspect really has to be cutting in a moment. So what we did was we added a nose to her, and that nose really changed up Amy's face because Amy's got a very soft, small nose, and it doesn't have a power to it. And what we really wanted to do was change her profile a little bit. And it's amazing what a nose can do, because a nose just sort of what we call beaks her out a little bit. And the idea was that she's like this bird of prey, right? Where it's like she can just sort of focus in on what she's after, and she can take it apart with her, with her teeth, her beak, her everything she is. And so what we did to really, really sort of sell that point home was we narrowed in one of her irises. So it looked like she had a smaller eye that was more beady and can really focus on the prey. And then the beak, and then the teeth. Now the teeth were an interesting thing because we're going through a lot of studying of there's these gum diseases where people have too much gum and it makes them look like they have baby teeth. And one of the rules I always go by when we're designing villains and stuff is subtleties with changing teeth. And if you can ever so slightly drop the gum sometimes, that you can't tell what's going on, but there's something there. And we did that, and those baby teeth really kind of factored in that whole bird teeth thing too, where it's like these tiny little teeth that now it's not it doesn't knock you over the head. It doesn't hey guys, look at these teeth, look at these nose, look at this eye. But all of these things combined with her look when we first see her in the principal's office with that beautiful red wig that Meliza did, all of it just sort of adds to this sort of what the fuck am I looking at? What is this? There's something offsetting. So when she strips off that stuff and she's at the house and she's wearing her turban and everything, and she's starting to get youthful again because she's preying upon the energy of the parents and everybody else that she's sort of turning into her weapons, she's starting to get more youthful. And so Leo's re-engineering her skin. He's putting more moisture into it. He's putting tiny bit more color into it, but she still has to have that predatory aspect. Why the nose and the teeth, the eye, earlobes to extend her whole face, brow covers, getting rid of her brows. It's amazing what happens when you just get rid of somebody's brows altogether. It changes the whole landscape of the face. So all of those sort of elements really sort of play into, creating this sort of really unforgettable character, right? And we see her in so many different looks throughout the last act. And it's amazing. I mean, if you really watch the film, she's probably only in about 25 minutes of it, in the last sort of 25 minutes, if you will, maybe 30 in different spots. But how much ground we covered with different looks with her in that amount of time. I think every time you saw Gladys, she kind of just looked way different. And it was and so that was a great challenge for us because we're kind of with the Cindy Sherman-esque sort of inspiration, Diana Arbus inspiration and everything, with the makeup and everything, and this whole state of deconstruction, and then seeing her sort of as she gets healthier again, and all the color returned to her head. It was just one of those great experiences where I think we let Amy play in that sort of playground that we created with all of these looks. And she really just sort of knocked it out of the park because
she did.
in every scene that you see her in as well. And I think I'd like to say that, all of this sort of collaboration really puts that energy into her in front of the camera. So it was a great experience because I think all of us were sort of firing on all cylinders really to sort of bring this character to life because none of us have ever seen a character like this.
No, none of us have either. I'm thinking about that nightmare look where she's in his nightmare and she has the sort of smeared lipstick. There's something triggering about a woman in smeared lipstick. I think it means so much. It can mean like sadness or violence or maybe intoxication or broke. Yeah, I mean that signals to whatever you want, right?
Yeah, that was such a fun look. We knew from the get-go that these looks were going to be the first looks that we see Aunt Gladys. Although we don't know who she is, we don't know it's Amy Madigan. We do know that she pops up in Justine's nightmare, that she pops up in Archer's nightmare. She's in James's nightmare. So we do see these small little snippets of her. And Zach from the get-go said, whatever we do for her everyday beauty, let's say that is 80%. The nightmare needs to be 500% because you're going to have a fraction of a second to really get your point across. And that was such a fun makeup. I think the challenging aspect of building Gladys was almost taking every natural inclination that you have as an artist or building a character, and we quickly learned to do the exact opposite. Whether it was, making the pupils really big and getting those creature eyes. And then, we were like, well, what if we make the iris small? There's something really unsettling about seeing the entire iris when your eyes are at rest, because you can't see anyone's entire iris when their eyes are at rest. And there's something very unsettling about it. And instead of going with sharp creature teeth, Jason's like, well, what if we do the really gummy, nubby teeth? Mm-hmm. And, so it was always so much fun to do the exact opposite of what your natural inclination is. So for the nightmare to me, was almost a little bit more indicative of a Diane Arbus, Cindy Sherman, artwork, photograph, because her blush, everything was so asymmetrical. The one brow was just a little bit or much bit higher than the other one, and the blush placement would be here. On the other side it would be much higher up on the cheeks, so you didn't really know quite where you wanted to look, but you knew that whatever you were looking at was a very strong impact of color, which is what I really wanted when designing these nightmare looks. And a funny story about the nightmare look in Archer scenes. It was filmed we shot it in a very small room, kind of like a room that I'm in now on stage. And it was going to be a VFX overlay because when you're watching the film, Archer's looking at his son, Matthew, and he's swaddled in the bed until they had to do a VFX overlay. So they had to put then Amy in the exact same position with the exact same swaddle and the exact same amount of blankets, and props and set deck worked feverishly for forever, just getting everything to match perfectly. So they finally got the overlay done perfectly. The lighting, everything matched, the shot with Matthew exactly. And so they were doing camera rehearsals, and it was pretty dark. So I was like, I got to get in there and I got to put more red lipstick on. So I told Zach, and Zach's like, yeah, she has to have more red lipstick on. We have to get that punch factor. Let's let Leo in. You guys help Leo in. It's a room full of grips and electric camera. Zach's in there in the corner. It's so tight. There are flags, lights everywhere to get just this beautiful effect. I'm crawling over under everything. And it's dark in there, so I'm going to apply the lipstick, and it was either I think it was a grip or an electric that used their iPhone light and shined it on Amy, so I can see. They're like, here you go. And Larkin, I hear Larkin offset. He's like, who's doing that? Whose flashlight is that? And we're like, oh God, we're all in trouble. And right, and he's like, no, that looks cool. Can you do it again? And so that's kind of how that jump scare came to be, with that bright flash of blue light. And it was so cool because you really, that cool blue light on Amy's skin, and we really texturized the skin, really did those pops of color. The creams on top of the alcohol paints to create just a huge mixture of texture. And with that harsh blue light, you really picked up on all of that. And it really picked up those blue tones and the reds. So the red lipstick was so bright while everything just seemed, just speckled with color and dry. And it was just it ended up being a really fun
I can't
effect.
wait to go watch that again now that I
Yeah, and
wanted
it's just
to
kind of,
go
a
back.
testament to this movie and just filmmaking in general. That's just the magic of filmmaking. With it being, I feel like everything in this production was just this breathing entity and it just, when something worked, it worked, and you just went with it.
Before we leave Aunt Gladys for a couple other things, I just have to ask, there's a lot of talk about a prequel being in the works. If you would imagine her at, like, say, 20, what was her style then?
Oh, man, I mean, first of all, we would be just beyond honored to even be involved with something like that in the first place. So I can't even begin to imagine. But I would think, I think that wherever Aunt Gladys came from, I think she would think that she was very chic. I think she would think that she was very chic. And I think that she was definitely, I think that at whatever age, she was extremely eccentric in her own right. Maybe coming from not a great upbringing, maybe being bullied extensively as a young woman or a young girl. I think. And I see Gladys kind of stealing away into some dark aspects of art or something, and it just kind of evolved into this crazy, eccentric character that's fascinated with Vogue and with makeup and has.
She loves clothes, right? She wants to
but has this very dark edge about her, like Jason said, when she snaps to you and you see that beak and you see that narrow eye. She ultimately, I believe, she was a woman scorned, and I'd be excited to see where that story goes. What do you think, Jason?
I like the idea of thinking, that it could be sort of like a parallel to today's society, meaning like, we see Aunt Gladys come up and, she obviously has that line in the principal's office where she's talking to the principal about the parents having consumption and things like that, which kind of alludes
to consumption.
Yeah. And it kind of alludes to something like, well, how old is Aunt Gladys? I mean, it's been a long time since anybody.
What even is consumption? Like, who gets fucking consumption?
And I love the idea that we can sort of understand that an animal like that, right, a creature like that, can exist in a world where technology is less, and she's having a much harder time now, sort of trying to be the chameleon, because technology is much more out there. People are more connected. Right. Things stand out more. But back in the day, when technology like the cell phone, computers, the internet, things like that, she can kind of go in and out. She can kind of assimilate. And she can kind of be that mushroom fungus, that the parasite that's referred to so many times in the film, off of society that way. And she can be that quiet little mouse that's just sucking the soul out of everybody. And I think that would be an interesting thing to see, how that doesn't survive these days. And I think that there's sort of like, none of this is anything that Zach has told me or Leo or anybody. This is just my own, how our imaginations work based off of our experiences, and thinking that might be really cool. But anything that it is, I mean, it'd be a hell of a challenge for Zach, I think, to really sort of try to find that backstory, because now Gladys belongs to the world. And everybody, it's funny because when you read a Stephen King novel, it's always so much better than every movie, because you now have this intimate relationship with the words and the characters and all of these things. The same with a movie. You have this intimate, relationship with Gladys now, and you formed your own backstory in your own brain, and now he's going to have to sort of contend with that and not play up to tropes and things. So it's a hell of a challenge, and I think it's a probably something he's already thought through with regards to creating the character of Gladys. But
And
I
we
think
can
it'd be,
only see Amy Madigan in the role, so I don't know how
yeah.
that thinking would be, but anyway,
Well,
we'll see.
there's also all sorts of great things you can do these days with technology.
Right,
So
right.
yeah.
Speaking of the other effects, poor Principal Mark, is everything practical?
Yeah.
Talk
Yeah,
a little bit.
why don't you start, Leo? There's one thing that isn't, but Leo can.
Yeah, we played around with the eyes so much in prep. Uh, and I know Jason worked with a few things, just really trying to get that the bulging eye effect, but it just knowing the direction that the film was going and how rooted in realism it needed to be, we just weren't confident that there was a way to get the lifelike eye bulging effect and it still look real, if that makes sense, right, Jason?
Yeah. So the thing is when you're doing prosthetics on the eyes, mostly what you can do is only offer people a straight ahead view. You don't really have periphery view. So knowing that he was going to have to be doing all of this running, and these are like, 100-degree days with 80% humidity in Atlanta. And, this is a lot of running for an actor to do. You don't want to pile on top of that. And, it's also just dangerous when you sort of block people's visions because we'd be able to accomplish it in a still shot when we didn't have to take his eyesight into consideration. But seeing as how we wanted the man to survive and not fall and break his cranium open on anything. And it's such a small thing. So VFX went ahead and did a quick test. And Zach is like, when I touched base with Zach, he was like, no, it's great. It's great. We're only going to see it briefly. So it really works and they don't have tracking issues. And I was like, great. So that was a really effective thing. So everybody, and what I was worried about with that visual effects look was that everything was going to be extreme. Like it just pulled you out of it. And it's so minimal, but it's like it's just so unsettling. And everybody kind of has that a little bit when they're going crazy if you look at their eyes. And I thought that was a great little like just little moment to really do that. When Principal Marcus is in his house and he's attacking his husband, Terry, the idea for that was that the head completely caves in, and he's doing it by his own volition. He's been turned into a weapon. The thing that I love about that particular scene was that the fact we haven't. This was the first time in the film where we kind of tipped our hat to like, oh, this whole tone of this film has just changed. I mean, we saw Aunt Gladys, and there's some audacity there, and then you saw this, and that's when the horror starts. And it such an impact when somebody's just completely caving in somebody's head with their own head, using it as a weapon. What we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that Benedict, who was playing Principal Marcus, Benedict Wong, was able to sort of go to town on it. And we created a perfect lifelike dummy of Terry that was completely silicone rubber, meaning there was no hard parts in it whatsoever. And we made it a 3-stage dummy. And the first stage was just the beautiful looking dummy that matches Terry. You get the first couple of impacts on that. Take that head off, put a new head on. That head is now slightly more caved in. And then a couple more impacts of that. And then we put in the really caved in head. And there's sort of the coup de grace. What I loved about seeing the movie was the fact that scene's not overtly crazy. Like you don't see all the caving in like we originally planned. They play a lot off of Amy, and there's the normalization of the scene of that violence playing in the background. And it really, I thought, was more impactful than just seeing the gore score for just the gore score alone. It's like, we call it the gore score because it's like, every horror movie, you want to get the gore score up because that's what's right. But it was so much more unnerving and impactful when she's cleaning up and she's like,
She's just taking it easy over there. Yeah, very
yeah,
much so.
yeah. So that kind of balance is what I think Zach does so well, which is like when he wants you to see it, you're gonna see it, like we saw at the end. But when we don't, we're gonna play with everything in the scene and all the tools in the toolbox to really make the full impact emotionally to the audience.
Are there any other of those, let's say the potato peeler or
The potato peeler was great because it's like, who's ever seen that in a film, right? The vegetable peeler. And you're
that
just
was
like,
horrifying, and you do that so well because I don't remember actually seeing because I think I
yeah,
was trying not to look.
Well, when we read it, we thought the same thing. We were like, oh, this
yeah.
took a turn. And then Zach explained how he was going to shoot it.
No,
So
that could
sorry,
be,
go on, Jason.
and that's one of those things in those moments where it's like when you read it, you're like, ooh, that can go south real quick. That could be one of those sort of like 1980s top moments.
Yeah.
And but when we got into it, the initial first test that we did smaller pieces because props found these veggie peelers that were really small. And Zach's like, it's just not having the impact. It's just not having the impact. And I go, okay, so we got to make it bigger. So the props was having a hard time doing it. So we just modeled, we created our own veggie peeler in 3D and modeled it and printed it and created props for them. And that gave me a bigger landscape of skin that I could run through it. And it's an appliance that we call, it's sort of a double decker appliance, if you will. So it's the gore undermouth of what that peel looks like. And then I'm not going to get too technical here, but we snap that and we create the overlayment pieces, right? The overlayment pieces are kind of lightly glued on and everything. Then I feed part of it through the veggie peeler and then grease everything up. And then she goes to town and the skin comes out. So it's a little bit of a technical thing, but at the same time, when Zach came into the trailer after we applied it, and he was like, "Oh shit, you went big," and I was like, "Oh no, too big?" And he was like, "No, no, I think it needs to be big for it to read." So I think it was quick, it was fast, and I just love watching everybody's reaction in the theater with that because as that
You can
skin
start a
peeled out,
business with those, your own potato veggie peelers.
yeah. My favorite thing was when they were giving away these gifts, these grab bags to screeners or influencers that they would invite to the movie. They would give out these fake peelers. Like they had a whole bunch of them printed, and I was like, that was so hard to figure out. That was so hard to
Oh,
do.
I want one.
And y'all just
And they
mass
just went and
produced
mass produced them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
cool.
you should get some sort of cut off those.
Yeah, right. We were kind of like I was like, Zach, what color do you want this? Lime green. And he sent over a Pantone color, and I was like, okay. And then we painted it that way. And then on the day I get in there and I'm like, oh yeah, this goes in this kitchen. All right. So
Yeah.
it's like it feels like the kitchen sort of put together from the 70s and 80s.
I just want to ask you about the incredible scenes with the children. How did you work with them? It must have been kind of traumatizing.
I mean, not really. Actually, you would think so, but it wasn't. Uh the kids were all really excited to do this. They were all really excited, and they're kind of at that age to where they get it, but they don't. And then, they're so impressionable. So I feel like just it was a constant driving home that it's not real, and the mood was always light, and it was always fun, and we always kept it fun. And Amy was so wonderful with all the kids. She was always hanging out with the kids, and she'd let them touch her earlobes or touch her fake nose or something. And they were all so excited, and they all just really loved being there, especially when it came to getting souped up or getting dirty, and the kids were like, "Can I have more soup? Can I have more soup?" Which was an alcohol makeup mixture that we made, so it would stay on, and we could build it in layers. So they loved getting dirty, they loved getting grimy, they loved running after Amy, they loved Amy. And I mean, Jason can tell you about them getting sprayed with blood. They
Yeah,
loved
that
it.
was
I mean, there may be some therapy in the future, but at the time, they loved it.
that was one of those things where like, Leo and I had talked and a couple other people had talked. I was like, shit, man, we're gonna really traumatize these kids because this body looks really real. And when you start to tear it apart, this whole pieces of skin that stretch and all the blood's gonna spray out. And I was like, these kids are gonna get all messed up because it's they've never seen anything like this. And I said, so we talked to Mary, and Mary was our wonderful producer, and she said, yeah, I think we need to have like a couple of rehearsal days, where they can sort of feel the body and they can sort of play with it, and we'll make it into a game. And so we did that. We did a couple of testing, pulling the body apart, and Zach's trying to direct this horde of this mob of kids that, as they get together, they all turn into raging animals. So trying to give them beat by beat directions was interesting, but eventually kind of all fell into line. And then I was like, okay, that's great. The body pulling apart, they can handle that, but can they handle being sprayed in the face with blood? Can they handle all the blood? Because it's a massive amount of blood coming out. And Mary's like, what do you think we should do? And I was like, well, let me load up a couple of the fire extinguishers with just water. And I'll just hit them in the face with it. We'll choose a couple and we'll hit them in the face. Luckily, it was a hot day, so we had lots of volunteers and they all loved it. And I was spraying them in the face with water. And they're like, this is no problem. I was like, who wants to do blood? And so one kid was like, I'll do blood. And so we load up the can.
There's always that one, right?
Yeah. And we just soak them. And then we had 4 more volunteers that wanted to get hit in the face with blood. And so I was like, okay, this is cool. It's a game now. They loved it. They had a good time with it. They were sort of being competitive with one another, who got more blood on their face. So you're like, okay, this is going to be good. We've made it into a game. It's just a game, and, I don't know, maybe kids are just used to it these days. But when I was a kid, if I saw that, I think I guess I would love it because of what
I was going to say, sounds like a fabulous day for the kids.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you guys go soon, but I just have to end. You guys have created just an iconic character, film history-wise, no doubt. But also in the shorter term, I think everyone thinks this will be the most popular Halloween costume of 2025. So I'm thinking, since I've had the luxury of talking to the creators here, basically, maybe you can give me some tips, as, I don't have the access to the materials that you have. So like, what is that little thing I can do? So I have some like 80s glasses here and like something like that. And then what is the thing I can do to really do Aunt Gladys well on a budget?
You got to get tinted glasses. You got to start there. Silver glass got a nice little tint.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like a purplish.
And I bet you got the makeup in your makeup drawer. I bet you got a red lipstick. I bet you got mascara that you can just.
You just have to give yourself a shaky hand when you're doing.
Yeah. You need a shaky hand and some good liquid eyeliner. And I even think the color red is fine. You want to be a Gladys that stands apart. Put your own spin on it. And don't be afraid of those scissors, sister. Don't be afraid of those scissors.
Bangs?
Yeah, you got to get them.
Yep, I feel like every woman has always wanted to give herself those bangs. This is your time.
I have never had bangs. Maybe this is the
wig. The trick of that wig is to really get your hair up high and tight underneath a wig cap, so that you get as much of your forehead as possible. So what you want to do is, when that wig is on top and you cut those bangs, you want to see as much of the forehead as possible. That's what we did with Gladys. And we took her hairline back a little bit underneath that wig so that it looked like everything was just sort of sitting on top. So that made it a little bit more disturbing. Whatever you do, do it all poorly.
And a nice little vintage shirt or something, right? Like red or pink or
pantsuit. You gotta get a pantsuit.
Oh, pantsuit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's got to be red or fuchsia or some pastel combo.
And you can send your check of royalty to both Leo and I.
I will, and I'll buy a potato peeler. But you guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate you spending time with me, and this is amazing work.
Thank you so much for having us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much to Leo Satkovich and Jason Collins. And thank you so much for listening. Pop Culture Confidential is a part of the Evergreen Podcast Network. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time.